Hello, welcome to my channel, and especially welcome all of my new subscribers. There are quite a few of you, and I appreciate all of you so very much. So today's video is brought to you by the book Presumed Guilty, Casey Anthony, The Inside Story by Jose Baez. It's a polar vortex here, and I finished this book in just a few days. I'll put a link to it in the description box below. But this book will really help you make sense of everything. If you were like me and watched the trial and the verdict, you're probably like, what the fuck? This book gives you a bit of insight, so check it out. Also, I will link the prosecutor's book in the description box if you're interested. Alright, so we left off with little Kaylee's skeletal remains being found just a few blocks from the Anthony house with duct tape on them. Let's get into part 2. I'm sorry, there's no way to make that into a smooth transition. A few important things happened between Kaylee's remains being found and Casey's trial. The first would be, because of the duct tape found on the skeleton, the prosecutors decide to seek the death penalty.
Florida prosecutors plan to seek the death penalty if Casey Anthony is convicted of killing her daughter. But Anthony's attorneys said they'll do whatever is necessary to defend their client from the state trying to take her life. Anthony was arrested last October, but prosecutors then didn't indicate they'd seek the death penalty. She's accused of killing Kaylee, who was 2 when she disappeared in June. Hundreds of volunteers searched for the missing child, whose remains were found in the woods near her family's home last December. The discovery was made 6 months after the child was last seen. Anthony claimed her daughter had been kidnapped by a babysitter. She has pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder.
Meanwhile, Kaylee's grandfather, George, tried to commit suicide.
Real scare here yesterday when she realized George had disappeared with his sleeping pills, blood pressure medication, and a photo of Cindy and Casey, but nothing else.
We're worried that she's done something to herself.
Cindy Anthony and her attorney were worried because just moments earlier, George had texted some disturbing messages to her and their friends from his cell phone. Messages like he did not want to live anymore and that he wanted to be with Kaylee. George also texted that he wanted to be left alone and wanted to make sure Kaylee was in God's arms. He would not tell them where he was, but through cell phone data, Orange County Sheriff's investigators tracked him to Daytona Beach, and police there found his car at the Hawaii Motel on Ridgewood Avenue. They found him in his room, melancholy and despondent, but he agreed to go with them to Halifax Medical Center where he's undergoing psychological evaluation.
Sources say in the letter, George mentioned that he wanted to go to heaven. He only mentioned Casey Anthony a few times and said that she was a strong, determined person. He focused the letter mainly on Kaylee, Cindy, Lee, and Lee's girlfriend Mallory. He told Cindy he was a failure as a husband and a father. He went on to say Lee was a great son and he was proud of the man he had become. There were no clues into Kaylee's death.
George said, "I'm sorry," to Casey in that letter. Speaking of letters, some letters that Casey was sending to one of her friends in jail were leaked to the media, and the letters contained some interesting family secrets, if you believe them to be true.
And as for the claims of sexual abuse, Casey told her pen pal, "I know what it feels like to be physically, emotionally, and sexually abused. I was to blame for my brother walking into my room at night and feeling my breasts while I slept. I think my dad did the same thing to me, but when I was much younger."
After seeing the letters, Casey's lawyer, Jose Baez, went to talk to her about the abuse, and she didn't want to talk about it. And it took quite a while of him prodding her before she actually talked about the abuse and told him what really happened the day that Kaylee died. Meanwhile, the prosecution had a bit of a dilemma on their hands. Because Kaylee's remains were skeletonized, there was no way to determine how the child died, but the medical examiner ruled it a homicide anyway. Despite that, the prosecution was super confident going into trial. After all, with Casey's strange behavior after Kaylee died, it seemed like an easy case to win. They were so confident, in fact, that one of the prosecutors, Ashton, signed a book deal and was working with a ghostwriter before the trial even started. The police also continued to leak a bunch of the information to the media. Some of it wasn't even true. They said that there was a heart-shaped sticker placed on the duct tape around Kaylee's skull, and there was no heart-shaped sticker. So the judge decided that Casey could not get a fair trial in Orlando. So what he did was he brought jurors in from another part of Florida into Orlando. And in May of 2014, the so-called trial of the century began with the prosecution's opening statements.
30 days passed between the time that anyone but Casey Anthony saw Kaylee and when she was reported missing by her grandmother, Cindy Anthony. So what happened? Day 1, Monday, June 16th, 2008. Cell phone records for Casey Anthony show that she did not leave the area of her parents' house until after 4 p.m. that day, despite the fact that her father saw her leave the residence at 12:50. When she leaves, she tells her father, George, that she's going to spend the night with Kaylee, with a babysitter. She told her mother that she was going to spend the night with a babysitter by the name of Zanny. You will learn during the testimony and evidence in this case, there is no Zanny. Like Casey Anthony's job, Casey Anthony's babysitter was a figment of her imagination. There is no Zanny. So when Casey Anthony appears on a surveillance video at the Blockbuster with her boyfriend, Tony Lazzaro, on the night of June 16th of 2008 at 7:54 p.m., where is Kaylee Anthony? Brian Berner, the neighbor, sees Casey Anthony again. Backs her car into the garage. And at about 1:30, 2:30 in the afternoon, asks Brian Berner if she can borrow a shovel. He will testify that she had the shovel for maybe an hour or so and returned it. He didn't notice anything unusual about its condition. George Anthony worked that day from 3 to 11 p.m. Cindy Anthony, again, inquiring about the whereabouts of her granddaughter, who had spent no more than a day away from her grandparents' home in her life. Casey Anthony told Cindy, her mother, that she was going to be at a conference in Tampa for work, and that Kaylee would be with Zanny and 2 other people, Juliet and Annabelle. Casey Anthony 18th with Tony Lazzaro that night. Tony will say Kaylee wasn't there. So on Wednesday, June 18th of 2008, where is Kaylee Marie Anthony?
The prosecutor, Linda Drane Burdick, also talked about in her opening statements who the jury would be hearing from, such as the handler of cadaver dogs who alerted to decomposition in Casey's car trunk, as well as an expert who found Kaylee's hair follicles in Casey's trunk, one of which had a death band at the root, which means that the hair came from a dead body. Detectives would also testify that the duct tape used on Kaylee was the same duct tape that Casey stole from her parents' house. A computer expert would testify that chloroform, neck breaking, self-defense, and foolproof suffocation were found on the Anthony family computer. Then, the defense made their dramatic opening statements where they told everyone for the first time what they believe happened the day that Kaylee died. They also were going to reveal some family secrets to explain the way Casey acted after Kaylee died.
Everyone wants to know what happened. How in the world can a mother wait 30 days before ever reporting her child missing? It's insane. It's bizarre. Something's just not right about that. Well, the answer is actually relatively simple. She never was missing. Kaylee Anthony died on June 16, 2008, when she drowned in her family's swimming pool. You're going to hear that Kaylee loved to swim, and Kaylee could get out of the house very easily, and did so on that day. This family must keep its secrets quiet. And it all began when Casey was 8 years old and her father came into her room and began to touch her inappropriately. And it escalated. And it escalated. What does a sex abuse survivor look like? They wear a scarlet letter. This was being investigated. This all came to light. Everyone was aware that they hid this beautiful child like a flower in the attic. They treated this pregnancy as if it never happened. Police got to be a little suspicious, and you'll hear evidence that Casey has a brother, and he too wanted to follow in his father's footsteps. And on certain occasions when he was a teenager, he attempted to also touch his sister, although it didn't go as far. It got so bad that the FBI did a paternity test to see if he was Kaylee's father. And when he was confronted with this information, he didn't deny it. He said, "We'll talk about it when the time is right." Casey was raised to lie. This child, who at 8 years old, learned to lie immediately. She could be 13 years old, have her father's penis in her mouth, and then go to school and play with the other kids as if nothing ever happened. Nothing's wrong. That will help you understand why no one knew that her child was dead. That's the most important thing you must keep in the back of your mind, is that sex abuse does things to us. It changes you. Some people are fortunate to live with it. Others are not. And in this sad tragedy, it had to happen to Casey. On June 16th, 2008, Casey was home with Kaylee, and so was her father. Early morning hours, the exact time is not known. It could have been early afternoon, early morning. Actually, it was the early morning hours. George Anthony approached Casey and started yelling at her. "Where's Kaylee? Where's Kaylee?" They began to search the house. They couldn't find her. They searched in the bedroom. They searched under the beds, in the closets, in the garage. Then they went outside. This is a mock-up of the Anthony home, where you'll see they both came outside. Casey came around to the left of the house. George went that way towards the pool. They have an above-ground pool with a ladder. And we'll talk about the pool and the ladder in just a moment. But what happened next is, as soon as Casey came around this corner and went back, she saw George Anthony holding Kaylee in his arms. She immediately grabbed Kaylee and began to cry and cry and cry. And shortly thereafter, George began to yell at her. "Look what you've done! Your mother will never forgive you, and you will go to jail for child neglect for the rest of your freaking life." She cried and asked for her father's help. And it was shortly thereafter that George did help. It's at this moment that Casey should have been stronger. Casey should have called 911. Casey should have done the right thing. And that's what she's guilty of. She's not guilty of murder. This is not a murder case. This is not a manslaughter case. This is a sad, tragic accident that snowballed out of control.
So this is pretty screwed up, no matter which side you believe. Either a woman killed her child, blamed it on her dad, and then accused her dad of the worst things possible, or a dad is letting his daughter sit in jail and possibly face the death penalty just so no one would find out that he had molested her. The prosecution called George Anthony as their first witness in hopes that he would disprove everything that the defense just said. That would prove to be a big mistake because the jury just didn't believe George Anthony. To be fair, he has a way of talking, and he even does it in TV interviews, where his answers seem a little rehearsed. But that could just be the way he talks, I have no clue.
Have you ever sexually molested your daughter, Casey Anthony?
No, sir.
Have you ever committed any sexually inappropriate act with or in the presence of your daughter, Casey Anthony?
No, sir.
Were you present in your home when Kaylee Anthony died?
No, and when I heard that today, it hurt really bad. Because if I would have known something would have happened to Kaylee, we wouldn't be here today.
So we can all be clear, Mr. Anthony. Did you know your daughter was pregnant the day the photograph was taken?
Not exactly. I mean, I had a feeling that she was, but then again, like I've stated, until we knew for sure, until we could take her in for some kind of test or something like that.
So the answer is no?
Yeah, the answer is no. I mean, does it look like it at that point, that photograph? Yeah, possibly.
I didn't ask you that. I just asked you, did you know if your daughter was pregnant the day that photograph was taken? Your answer is no?
No, not exactly no.
And as
the trial went on, the defense was doing a really good job putting doubt in everything that the prosecution said. For example, the prosecution said that Casey had possibly killed Kaylee with chloroform and that Casey had Googled chloroform hundreds of times. And the truth was, she Googled it once and it was after her boyfriend posted a meme about it on MySpace. Google searches for foolproof suffocation and stuff like that that were made on the day Kaylee died led to a lot of pro-suicide websites. So the defense argued that it was actually George who searched for that stuff because he wanted to kill himself after Kaylee died. A lot of the prosecution's other evidence, like the hair banding thing, is all brand new. It had never been used in a trial before except for this one. So everything was kind of really just disproven. According to the media, not so much. The media really did portray Jose Baez as an incompetent lawyer with this ridiculous defense that would never work. And when the defense had a good day in court, the media would just totally ignore it, and instead they would talk about stuff like what kind of faces Casey was making in court and whether she cried or not.
Look at Top Mom in court. There's the real Top Mom, but then when Baez slides over, she realizes the camera's on her. So she stops that horrific, evil-looking face she's making. And Top Mom's sitting there, frankly, everybody cover your ears, looking pissed. Just looking bored out of her skull, irritated, shooting daggers at her mother, and then she comes down off the witness stand and looks at her, Jane, looks at her and mouths a silent message to Top Mom. I love you. Top Mom looks away.
So because of all of this, because a lot of people watched this trial on TV, their perception of what was actually going on was quite skewed. The last witness called was a woman who claimed she had an affair with George Anthony.
I met him at a tent when his granddaughter was missing.
When?
I believe it was July, August maybe.
August of what year?
08, yeah.
2008?
Correct.
Did you develop a relationship with Mr. Anthony?
Yes, sir, I did.
And was this an intimate relationship?
Yes.
Did there ever come an occasion where you had a heart-to-heart conversation with George Anthony as to what happened to his granddaughter?
Yes.
Okay. Tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what you were doing and how that all transpired.
The particular night that you're referring to?
Yes.
He was sitting on my couch, and I was sitting on the floor, and he had told me, he had said it was an accident that snowballed out of control, but I was in shock, and by the time I looked up, his eyes were filled like with tears, and I didn't elaborate.
Can you read the date of that text message to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury and then its contents?
Tuesday, December 16th.
What year?
It doesn't say.
Okay. Go on.
From George Anthony, just thinking about you. I need you in my life.
Then George went on stand and denied the whole affair, which it was pretty obvious he was lying, so it didn't help the prosecution any, because if he's lying about that, what else was he lying about? So after 6 weeks, the trial finally ended, and after deliberating for 8 hours, the jury came back with their verdict.
In the Circuit Court for the 9th Judicial Circuit in and for Orange County, Florida, State of Florida versus Casey Marie Anthony. As to case number 2008 CF 15606-0. As to the charge of first-degree murder, verdict as to count 1, we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty, so say we all, dated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, on this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of aggravated child abuse, verdict as to count 2, we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty, so say we all, dated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of aggravated manslaughter of a child, verdict as to count 3, we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty, so say we all, dated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed.
Then the country pretty much lost its collective mind.
What? Not guilty! God damn! Hold on, what else is there?
As to the charge of aggravated child abuse, verdict as to count 2.
She got on murder! She get this one.
What is this?
Not guilty! You goddamn kidding me! That goddamn bitch That goddamn bitch! What'd she do for a goddamn O.J. Simpson's horseshoe?
After that not guilty verdict, somewhere out there, the devil is dancing tonight.
She deserves to rot in hell.
There's a God up in heaven that's bigger than that judge up there and that stupid jury. She can run, but she can't hide. God will get her.
As to the charge of first-degree murder, verdict as to count 1. Leave the jury, find the defendant not guilty. Date of July 2011, signed, full person. As to the charge of aggravated child abuse, verdict as to count 2. Leave the jury, find the defendant not guilty. Leave the jury find the defendant not guilty.
So I want to know in the comments, what would you guys have voted for if you were on that jury? Would you have put her for first-degree murder, maybe just manslaughter, or would you have not found her guilty of anything? Personally, I feel that she probably did do it, but that's not a good enough reason to convict someone. You can't put someone in jail for life or put them to death and then be like, oops, if they were innocent. So I would have to find her not guilty, because with her and George, it just becomes a he said, she said type thing. And they were both there, so no one really knows what happened. All right, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.